With that all said, let's welcome our lovely speaker today, who is Zoë Rose. Zoë Rose has worked for a number of like really high profile organizations that you will have heard of, like BBC, Cambridge University Press, and Gov UK. Obviously, you know, from our perspective as content designers, that is, you know, she has also worked for Seek, PwC, and has been a UX trainer at General Assembly, which I only found out when I was actually researching your bio, Zoe. I didn't realize that.
Oh,
Yeah. So Zoe has her own training company called Great Question, which is a usability and accessibility training consultancy that's focused on user experience design and design for disability. We were really lucky recently to do some training with Zoe on accessibility for meetings, and it was absolutely fantastic training. So we really recommend it, full of actionable, like useful insights that you can apply. Like saying it's for meetings kind of makes it smaller than actually the impact of it. I think it's like it was such an incredibly eye-opening piece of training. So really, yeah, can speak from personal experience to how good that was. Today, Zoe is going to talk a little bit about good intentions, bad guys, and how disability inclusion is going to always be your best bet. So we'll have time for questions through the talk. Zoe will talk you through how she likes to work. And but yeah, feel free to use the chat and chime in, and I will hand over to Zoe to tell us a little bit about her talk. Stop my sharing. Was I sharing then, or did I just
oh
manage
yeah.
to talk all the way through
No, you
without?
were sharing, but
Okay.
Oh, okay. I'm just having a little Zoom, uncoordinated Zoom moment. There we go. Stop sharing.
Oh, that's beautiful. McGee, what an introduction. Honestly, if there was award ceremonies for really fulsome introductions, I would give you a prize. Thank you very much for saying so many nice things. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to pop open my slides. Okay, everyone, you should be able to see a PowerPoint behind me and me in the front like this. Are we all good? Any problems, jump into the chat and let us know. Let's kick off. All right, first off, language warning. You're going to hear me say the word disabled a lot. Now, especially for those of us who work in government, we've been trained to say person with disability, person with disabilities, individual with disability. It's called person first language. Person first language has kind of a mixed reputation in the disabled community. I don't really like it, and I don't tend to use it. I tend to just say disabled person. So if that's new for you, it is intentional. And no, it's not in style manual, but it's what we're going to do anyhow. Okay, cool. Right. I'd like to kick off today by telling everyone a story. Now, I've got a slide here showing the cast of a TV show called Riverdale. Some of you might have seen it. There's a very attractive man with red hair sitting in a diner staring at the camera. That's Archie. And the reason I picked this picture is because this is a story about a man who looked so similar to this actor, I can't even describe it to you. The person I'm describing here is Archie. Was actually a man in his mid-20s. He had cerebral palsy, learning disability, and epilepsy. Those are the three things he had. Now, where did I meet Archie? I met Archie at an inclusive design workshop. Oh, that sounds fun. For those of you who haven't met it, inclusive design is a process of disability-driven design where by looking at the acute need of somebody who has a disability, we hope to come up with a solution that works better for everyone. Now, Archie had a really specific problem. He wanted to move out of home, but his cerebral palsy really meant that he struggled to dry himself after a shower. And that was the last barrier he needed to cross before being able to move out and get independent. Okay, good stuff. So what's happening at this event? Well, what we've got is we've got a big room at a university, and we've got maybe 10 teams, and each team is comprised of engineers and designers and other problem solvers, and we've all been allocated a disabled person who has a specific problem that they want to solve, okay? And we're all in this big room, and it's pretty noisy. and it's pretty hard to get around, and the toilets aren't very well signposted, and it's fairly intense, right? There's a lot of action happening in the room. And because this is the kickoff of what's going to be a multi-step event, there are speeches. There are speeches. So we've got people getting up and giving speeches. We've got people giving speech after speech after speech. There's little snacks to eat, but they're on paper plates that are kind of really foldy and really easy to kind of like drop if you have like dyskinesia, which Archie does. There's wine, but it's in little plastic glass that are really easy to knock over. It's getting really hot in there. The speeches are really dragging on. The social pressure is up. Archie is starting to look incredibly uncomfortable because he's surrounded by like all this stuff and he can't get up, and there's no kind of breakout room, nothing like that. But eventually, after like God knows how long the speeches end, everyone gets congratulated for how good we are for being there. And then the organizer says, okay, everyone, let's go. And the room explodes. We got 100, 200 people, really keen, really engaged. All of them start talking at the same time. There is noise and chaos everywhere. And poor Archie is sitting at this table with 10 to 12 different professionals, all of whom desperately want to help him, who are all asking, yelling questions at him about exactly what it's like for him to be wet and naked and vulnerable at the same time. How are we feeling? Are we feeling like this event is going well? I hope everyone's shaking their heads. No, not only is this not going well, it is actively dangerous. Archie has epilepsy that can be induced by stressful environments like the one we're in. It's profoundly unsafe, but here's the thing. Every single person in that room identified as the good guy. Nobody was thinking about the risks or damage. Everyone was thinking about what a great job they were doing and how benevolent they were for being in the room in the first place. So clearly what this tells us is good intentions, not necessarily that useful. Good intentions, not actually necessarily a preventative for doing harm. So if good intentions don't really work, what happens if we have bad intentions? Just like to say out of the gate, I expect everyone to engage in the spirit of the day by putting their bad guy hats on, interrupting, jumping in, throwing annoying questions into the chat. The ruder, the better. Okay. I want us all to get into the spirit here. So please treat me very badly as the presenter. That's your job today. Let's have a quick skim here though. Bad guys, what do they want? I've got some images here of some classic Batman bad guys. We've got Mr. Freeze, Harley Quinn. We've got Two-Face, Joker, Penguin, and Poison Ivy, all quality bad guys. But in general, yes, thank you, Ali. World domination. You are on the money. Money, power, world domination, control, all of that good stuff. Yeah. Now, we can't get those things without a team behind us. So what that's telling us straight out of the gate is that in order to coordinate their squad of henchmen, all these bad guys need very good leadership skills. Yeah? Let's find out more. What do? Well, classically in comic books, the bad guys are the ones who actually do the things. In a standard comic book story, the bad guys come up with a cool scheme, and the job of the superhero is to come in and ruin everything. But when it comes, why is it similar to how we treat children? Put your speaker on, Elvia, tell me. But if you can't, that's okay. So the bad guys are the instigators, the innovators, they are the doers, they are the make it happeners. Yeah, they are getting out there and they are doing things, and the superheroes do the ruining. We can aspire to this, right? Proactive, that's what we're getting to here. Okay, to introduce myself, I'm Zoe. As McGee was saying, I do run a training company called Great Question, where I teach people about usability and accessibility. I am also a research student at University Technology Sydney, where I am looking at ways of improving design capability in the public service. And the last thing I do, as you might be able to see on this screen here, is I annoy people. This is me on stage at a recent Mandarin event for you public servants. That's an online publication for the public service. I was a panelist at this event where terrifyingly, the previous speakers were like 2 ministers and a senator, and for some reason I was there. And I am on screen in this picture looking more unimpressed than I intended to. And the man who is shying away from me is the secretary. So I write for the Mandarin, I write columns for the Mandarin about design issues in government and ways of improving design in government. My credibility when it comes to design comes from 3 things, and I will tell you what they are in order. 1, I've been doing design for disability as an area of interest for about 10 years. 2, I've been diagnosed ADHD for about 4 years. And 3, a couple of months after that ADHD diagnosis, I actually had a fall where I knocked out 3 ligaments in my left knee and became profoundly disabled and housebound for a space of about 6 months. And I'm mostly mobile now, but I've had a real crack at severe disability in my lifetime. Most of you know ADHD people do things in the wrong order. That's the wrong order, okay? I'd also like to recommend to you all that you don't have to be disabled to get involved in design for disability. It's completely fine not to have lived experience on this one, right? No need to have a big fall like I did. That's fine. So, right, principles. Principle number 1, exploit your existing resources. What do we mean by that? So, right, let's have a look at some definitions here. I'll try and move myself a bit. Oh, I cannot move myself very well. Okay. So the Australian Bureau of Statistics says that disability is any limitation. Oh, hang on, I'll let you read for a sec. It says disability is any limitation, restriction, or impairment which restricts everyday activities and has lasted or is likely to last for at least 6 months. Okay, everyone, I hope you have your browsers ready. We're going to do a survey. According to the last census from the ABS, what percentage of Australians are disabled? You have seconds to answer this question. Go to slido.com. The code is 2437555. Okay, my Slido has just, there it is. Okay. Brilliant. Yep, we got some answers coming in. That's real good. Love it. The nice thing about this is it's completely anonymous. So if you get it unbelievably wrong, you will never be judged for this. Terrific. We're going to call it there. So let's have a look at the answers. As it loads real slow. Okay. Okay, so we've got consensus. And I don't think that because I'm using that screen background, I don't think I can share that with you. What a shame. I reckon, no, if I turn off screen share, it'll take me to the beginning of the slide. So we won't do that. But I can tell you that we've got here 80% of you think it is more than 20%. Interesting. Because guess what? On this one, you are in fact wrong. The number, according to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, is 17%. However, that changes dramatically over a lifetime. Okay, so we've got among people who are 0 to 10 years old, the numbers are really down at that 5 to 7%, really, really low. By the time you get up to people who are like 90, it's about 80%. The tipping point is about 65. At 65, 50% of people are disabled and 50% are not. In the middle here in working age, for those of you who said 20%, working age is about 20%. However, this is according to that ABS definition, and we're going to come back to that. Okay. So for those of you who already have a mental model of disability as something that you can see, we don't walk down the street and see visible disability in 17% of the people around us, even when they are elderly. The vast majority of disabilities as categorized by the ABS are invisible, which means that in our workplaces and amongst our clients, we are dealing with disabled people absolutely all the time. They might not have disclosed and they might not self-identify. I, for example, couldn't have identified as disabled until I was diagnosed as ADHD because I didn't know. Still had ADHD though, that was always there. Going to move on to principle 2, destroying barriers to success. We've got Two-Face in the corner there. Okay. We're bad guys, right? We're proactive. If we see a barrier to success, we're going to destroy it. Yeah? Because we're bad guys. Now, that definition of the ABS, limitation, restriction, or impairment, which restricts everyday activities, that is what we call the medical model. The medical model states that disability is an impairment that exists somewhere in the body. That's not the only definition available, though. In fact, the standard definition, the one used by the World Health Organizations, most governments, and most of the administrative environments that you will find around Australian governments is in fact the social model, which is very different. So in the social model, disability is an interaction between an impairment in the body and a barrier in the person's environment. Just chuck it in the chat. Can anyone think of what kind of barrier? What would be a barrier? Can we think of one? That's okay. We will move right along. Oh, glasses. Yeah, glasses are. Ooh, Heron gets the gold star. Heron has said attitudes. Well done. So 4 barriers listed by People with Disability Australia. 4 classes are social, physical, communication, and, well done, Heron, attitude. Social barrier, those are the cumulative experiences of somebody over their lifetime. It's not getting the first job that was good because you were discriminated against. So your second job is looking at the CV of the first job and saying you didn't have a really good first job. It's not getting an accommodation in your exam, so your UAI was lower than it should have been, so you didn't get into law. It's all of that. Physical is exactly what you think it is. It's the ramps, it's the lighting, it's all that kind of built environment stuff. Communication is inbound and outbound communication. Clearly, that's going to be the one which will be of the most interest to the people in this room. And we can talk a bit more about that. And the last one, as Heron found, is in fact attitudinal. I'll point out that there is no such thing as a comprehensive or authoritative list. But if you look, for example, at the Centers for Disease Control in America, they have a list of 7 on it, McGee. They have a list of 7, which are these 4, plus another 3, policy, programmatic, and transportation, right? So this isn't a bad list, this 4. It's not comprehensive, but it's fine. Why does the ABS use a different definition? Because it's easier to count, McGee. It's easier to count. It's actually slightly more specific than the one that I showed you before. A person has a disability if they report that they have a limitation. And that, folks, if they report, that is the reason why the number is 17 and not 50. Because many people with disability do not identify as disabled, or alternatively, like me, are disabled and don't know it. Yep. The ABS is starting to move a little bit, just to pick up on the topic. The last census, which has not been released yet, so that was 2018 stats that we just saw. The questions in the census were actually more oriented around, do you need help with daily tasks? Which is a subtle but very specific point of difference. So severe disability for the ABS means you need help with at least one thing that you need to do every day. Low levels of disability are you occasionally need help with some things. So me, for example, ADHD, I would be low support needs, where Archie, that we described before, would be high support needs. Yeah? Cool. Keep it coming with the questions. I'm here. Okay, so bad guy principle number 3, we want to be alert to potential evil schemes, right? We are the instigators, we are the doers, we are the finders of opportunity for the world domination that has come up there. So how are we going to go about doing that? Well, let's ask this question. How many inventions can you think of, inventions, that were invented by, for, or with disabled people? And I've just got to press the button on my staggeringly slow internet that's just decided to give up on me. Okay. Get out of there. This is just a ruse to give you extra thinking time. The technology is actually completely fine. Okay. Stop. And oh, it's really just killing me. There we go. Okay. I'm really annoyed that I used up my jokes, because this would be an ideal time while Slido plays silly sillies. Right, there we go. Boom. Okay, now you can vote. Who's going to chuck in their votes? If there's a problem. Oh, bless. Thank you, McGee. Okay, for those of you who aren't in the chat, why did the computer catch a cold? It had too many windows open. So the Slido link is slido.com. The code is 2437555. All right, and I think something might have gone wrong there, because I'm not getting any votes through. So that is where we're at. Something's gone wrong. That's okay.
Do you
There
know
are
what? I've got it's available to us, the poll, and it says here there's 42% of people said more than 10. So it must just be not showing up on your
Oh, do you know what? I think this might be because I gave this talk literally yesterday. And I think that might be yesterday's crew. And that's why I was having the problems. Doesn't matter. We are
Gotcha.
going to roll straight through that one. Although I will say this, yesterday's crew was a group of consultants. I was 30 consultants, and 42 of them, 42% of them said that they could think of more than 10 inventions. And when I asked any of them to give an example, literally no one was willing to say. So I'd like to just say I appreciate that group for really embracing the theme of the event and absolutely lying through their teeth about how many inventions they could think of. Yes, McGee, thank you for laughing. Oh, they lied. That's all good. So here's one: touchscreens. What? How could touchscreens possibly be an invention for disability? Well, the touchscreen was actually invented by a company called Fingerworks. The main guy behind Fingerworks had RSI, repetitive strain injury. He was an engineer. and he was really struggling to use a keyboard and mouse. So what he wanted to do was to invent a way of interacting with a computer that was more broad gesture, that wouldn't hurt his hands as much as the fiddly little tippy tappies. Okay. That company was bought by Steve Jobs. 2007, we get the iPhone, but it is a disability-driven invention. What do we think? Is that like a fairly, it's a big one? Yeah, okay. You ready for the next one? It's got to be less than that though, right? Can't be as good as that. Email. What? So the person who came up with the protocol for email is a guy called Vint Cerf. Yes, you do spell it Vint Cerf. He is hard of hearing and his wife is deaf. They were both professionals. They worked in different offices. They really struggled to communicate through the day because neither of them could use the phone successfully and they were miles away. So Vint, who also came up with the TCP/IP protocol, which basically makes the internet go. He came up with this idea of having like a real-time text messaging service, which eventually became the email protocol. Now, as it happens, his wife didn't like it and wouldn't use it, but the idea was still there. Okay, phones. I can't be serious. Phones, really? Yes. So Alexander Graham Bell was not deaf. However, his mother was deaf, his wife was deaf, and his dad was a teacher at a deaf school. So he grew up around deafness. His original work into telephones was for the purpose of using electronic signals to enhance sound so that people could hear them better. Like we've seen those old-timey pictures of earphones, right? He was trying to get something better than that. Now, as it happened, the amplifier that he came up with also worked over long distances, but that wasn't the original driver. I will point out that the deaf community aren't really fond of Alexander Graham Bell because he was really against sign language. So you won't find any Bell fans amongst the deaf community. However, deafness was the driver of the telephone. Last one I'm going to chuck in here, punch cards. Yeah, everyone is, who's wondering about this one? Where's this one going to go? This can't be serious. So the guy who came up with this, his name was Herman Hollerith. We cannot retrospectively prove that Hollerith was dyslexic. We can say that there was a hell of a lot of evidence in his memoirs and accounts of his life that he couldn't spell, couldn't read easily, and couldn't do arithmetic particularly well, which was a problem because he was an engineer. One of his friends, he was complaining about this to one of his friends one day, and his friend said, well, why don't you like make a machine that can do maths for you? You're good at making machines and you're bad at maths, so make a machine to do the maths. He did. It was first used to tabulate the first US census in 1897. Smash hit, everything goes from there. Okay. I just want to see, chuck a little hand in the comments or just type yes if that list was surprising to you. I'm getting no, okay, we've got some yeses. Very good. I thought for a second no one was going to go yes, and I was about to be really horrified. Okay, Brian is half. Okay, that's good. I love that, Brian. That's good work. Okay, so we've got some yeses. What's going on? Why are so many of these inventions coming from disability? Just by the way, I can also add bicycles and typewriters to this list and potentially photocopiers. It's not short, right? What do we know? Well, here's the thing. It turns out that when you solve a problem for someone who is disabled, you accidentally solve problems for a whole lot of other people as well. So I've got a diagram here from the Microsoft Inclusive Design Toolkit, which is a fantastic resource if you want to use it. It's got a grid. The grid has 3 vertical axes and 4 horizontal axes. Vertical is permanent, temporary, and situational. Horizontal is touch, see, hear, and speak. So for example, if you are solving, let's just say a ticket kiosk A ticket kiosk for going on public transport. If you can make a ticket kiosk that works for a traveler who has one arm, that solution will also work for someone who has their arm in a sling, and will also work for someone who is holding a baby. At point of use, all those people effectively have one arm. So it turns out that design for disability is a really cost-effective R&D hack for innovation. Really cost-effective. And if you are dealing with clients who have very little interest in making the world a better place, but do have a strong interest in saving all their money and getting things that are actually innovative out for the lowest price, this is a very good way to do that. Now, I will take my bad guy hat off for just 1 second to point out one thing. There is something of a habit in design at the moment of using inclusive design as something of an extractive practice, where we're using the expertise of disabled people without adequate recompense and without adequate recognition. So inclusive design is amazing. It's also a really good time to pay people. And it's also a really good time to give people attribution in your research note, should you decide to do it. Because if you're using their expertise, they should get credit for being the experts. Bad guy hat goes back on. Extractive practice, yes, I can. Extractive practice means taking value out of your user group without balancing that with value returned. So paying someone for their participation in a research exercise, for example, would be equivalent value being exchanged. You're paying someone for their expertise the same way that you would pay someone for consulting in anything. It does happen that well-intentioned design practitioners, especially, walk into inclusive design with some in their hearts and like happiness in their soul, and expect people to give up their time for free on the basis that it will be making the world a better place. But because we are bad guys, we know that's a jerk move and we wouldn't do it. Okay, we're going to pay people for their expertise. Yes, we're all disabled at one point. Yeah, okay. So Mary, I love that comment. I'm going to pick it up. I'm going to run with it because there's a point of tension here. What you're describing there is an impairment. When you've got twins and you're holding both twins, okay, you've got an impairment. You're not interacting with the barrier at that stage. So it is true that most people will experience disability irrespective of which definition you use, medical or social, throughout their life. That's just it's the biggest minority group in the world, and it's the only one that you can join at any time, as I know, because I had my fall. So disability itself is a state that some people have permanently. I do. It's a state that some people move into and out of. I've done that as well. But the thing that we're really looking for is that interaction with a barrier. And do we remember what they are? I'll tell you. They're social, physical, communication, and attitude. And we'll talk about that again in a sec. Okay. All right, bad guy principle number 4, do not create your own competition. That's a terrible idea. If I'm going to rule the world, I don't want other supervillains emerging from the ranks to come snapping at my heels. I want them to be my loyal henchmen, okay? I don't want them to compete with me. So how do I avoid that? Well, I've got a picture here of Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy to talk a little bit about the role of bias, which is really tiring. Every time that you have to fight bias in the workplace, every time that you have to fight bias when you're dealing with a product, if it's baked into the product, it's tiring. It's using up the cognitive energy that you have that you'd rather be doing, getting on with your day. Some of you will be familiar with spoon theory. Who knows spoon theory? Gonna get a couple. Yes, we've got a couple. So spoon theory is the idea that when you have any kind of health condition that limits the amount of energy that you have to do things in your given day, It's basically like you wake up in the morning, and if you're able-bodied, maybe you have 15 spoons. So you spend a spoon on making breakfast, you spend a spoon on getting in the shower, you spend 2 spoons on getting to work, you spend 3 spoons on a meeting, you go through your spoons, and by the time you get home, you've still got a spoon left to make dinner, you've still got a spoon left to help your kid with their homework. If you have a chronic illness, you wake up in the morning, you have 5 spoons. So you got to choose, what are you going to spend them on? Are you going to skip the shower today? Can you get into work? If you need to if you need to do 10 spoons worth of things, can you take the next day off because you will have 0 spoons the next day? Right? So every time we encounter bias in the workplace and in the services that we're using, we end up using up extra spoons that we don't need to use up. Let's talk a bit more about bias and be specific and detailed. Confirmation bias. Oh yeah, the coin chest, that's a good one. I love that. Yep, coin chest. You wake up with a chest and you give them away during the day. Yep. So confirmation bias is when we see in people the thing that we expected to see. So if I have a belief that someone who is autistic is not creative, and I see that person doing a lot of spreadsheets at work, and I go, yeah, that tracks because they have so little creativity. Of course, they like spreadsheets. This is not actually true. It's just confirming what I already thought. Another one that can kick in, affinity bias. Who knows this one? This is a good one. Pop your hand up or chuck in if you know affinity bias. It's just when you prefer to interact with people who already remind you of you. So that might be on the basis of ethnicity and culture, might be on the basis of gender, it might be on the basis of neurotype. Quite famously, ADHD and autistic people prefer to hang out with other ADHD and autistic people, and neurotypicals tend to prefer out with neurotypicals. Does this mean we can't communicate with each other? No. Does it mean we have to be careful that we aren't excluding accidentally? Yes. And the last one I'm going to introduce you to is called benevolence bias. This is the nastiest one of them all, in my personal opinion. Benevolence bias is the bias. Sorry, I'll move myself back to the white. I forgot to do that. Benevolence bias is where our kindness and generosity to people we perceive as different, especially when there's an impairment involved, restricts their opportunities. So if I'm starting from the assumption that, say, for example, I have a colleague or coworker who is dyslexic, I won't give them any policy work because that involves a lot of reading and they won't like that. If we rinse and repeat that for over the course of, let's say, 18 months, we now have somebody who has no experience, knowledge, or skills in policy work and will not attain them because the prophecy has come true. They are now bad at policy work. Fortunately, we are all bad guys and we have no hesitation about giving people difficult things, do we? We're merciless. We're going to exploit these people. Yeah? We're not going to be nice to them. That would be the worst. Hot hint, it is actually the worst. So by restricting people's workload and engagement on the basis of assumptions, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, Brian. Absolutely. It does happen to everybody. So when we restrict people's access to opportunities based on our assumptions, that becomes a barrier. And when we introduce a barrier, the barrier is the thing that creates the disability. Benevolence can make someone disabled. Koa, I wouldn't say we're mean people. I mean, I want you to be mean, but only because it's better that way. Okay? Assumptions, biases are completely natural. They are also unavoidable. They can be mitigated, and they can be mitigated by recognizing them and knowing what they are, which is what we're doing now. Okay, because we know disability is impairment plus barrier. So what do we want to do? We want to remove the barriers, because at the end of the day, unhappy staff are not cost effective. They are not. Even if you have no interest in inclusion whatsoever, you do have an interest in team health. And sad people who cannot do their jobs effectively have a horrific impact on team health. Let's bear in mind that among our colleagues, there's no way in hell that you are not going to be working with disabled people, because we know, don't we, that for working age people, 20% or so, 22% are going to be disabled, even using the very strictest definition, where the actual numbers are probably more like 50. So you cannot avoid working with disabled people. You cannot avoid working for disabled people, and you cannot avoid having disabled people as clients. So you might as well exploit them while you can. Equally, unhappy users leave. Oh, whoops, my hand's been up. I'm so sorry. So equally unhappy users leave. Can we avoid having disabled users? Absolutely not. They're everywhere. They are also, just for the record, people who work in product, by far the most loyal of all user base, because they face higher switching costs between services, and because once they find something that works for them, that is such an uncommon experience, they usually stick with it forever. So if you can attract disabled users, they will be the ones who will stick with your product longer than any other user group. We know our barriers: social, physical, communication, attitudinal. Just as a guess, out of those, does anyone want to take a punt at which one disabled people say is the one that makes their lives worst? I don't have a Slido for this. I just want to see if anyone wants to have a crack. We've got some clever people in the chat. It is attitudinal. Pretty much universally, the most impactful barrier that disabled people face in any environment is attitude. If you have a decent attitude, the other things kind of sort themselves out. You can't do anything without that. Okay, last one, be ambitious. We want to attain all the power we can. Like, for example, disabled billionaire Elon Musk, who is autistic. Unfortunately, I cannot stand even looking at him, so we're not going to talk about him. He's awful. We're going to talk about Richard Branson, who is dyslexic, instead. And I'm just going to do a little bit of jiggery pokery and see if I can pull this up, because I want you to read this specific quote. Okay, here's a quote from Branson, who is like, he's still a billionaire, so he's still a policy failure, but it's hard not to like him, you know? So he says, my struggles have shaped Virgin as a company. I like clear, direct communication, and we have an inclusive culture. I would not have started a magazine or built Virgin, he's the Virgin guy, if I had not been dyslexic. I suspect I would have ended up having a much more conventional life. My father was a barrister and my grandfather was a judge. They expected me to follow suit, but because I was dyslexic, there was no way I thought I could do that. That turned out to be a big advantage. All right, so we've got our dyslexic billionaire here. If you were hiring a 22-year-old and you had dyslexic Richard Branson come through the door, would you hire him? I mean, you probably would, right? It would be silly not to. Okay. We're running close for time, so I'm going to skip that. I'm just going to tell you the answer. According to Dyslexia Australia, about 20%. About 20% of Australians are dyslexic. Thinking back to our definitions, how many of them know they're dyslexic? 4. Like, it's really, this is a very low identification level here. Most of those people most of the 1 in 5 who are probably dyslexic don't identify as dyslexic, do not know they are dyslexic, have never been told they might be dyslexic. But I'll tell you what, a hell of a lot of them think they're stupid. They were told so at school. They were held out of good jobs. They have faced, which one? It is social barriers for their entire life. And a lot of that potential is just sitting there on the table. So I'd like to introduce the last principle, principle 6, actually second last: exploit other people's resources. There are gigantic numbers of underutilized disabled workers out there right now. workers who, for the most part, really hate their current workplace because they face all those barriers we already talk about. Workers who have astonishing levels of bureaucratic know-how and incredible levels of ability to negotiate and navigate complex environments because they've been navigating the barriers for their whole life. These are really high quality people. Ripe to be hired, ripe to be exploited by organizations like yours. And that brings us to the last, which is principle 7, always be recruiting. I am, of course, it should be obvious to you right now, trying to recruit everyone on this call to my own personal evil empire. I would like you to become sleeper agents. I would like you to become activists. I would like you to become henchmen in my ongoing quest to dominate the world and to take it over for the benefit of disabled people everywhere. And on that note, I'm going to say thank you and open up to questions. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Zoe. Just because we're running short on time, I think what I'm going to do is I'll do some announcements and then I'll just say if anyone wants to save your questions, you can pop them in the chat or you can stick around for a few minutes.
I'm going to stick around. Okay.
Yeah, brilliant. All right, let me, if you don't mind, stopping your screen share, Zoe.
Yep, hang on a sec. That's my next thingy. I've got to go stop share.
Thank you. Okay. So, thank you. Yeah, so can you all see that? Great. Thank you so much, Zoe. I think, as I said, we did training with Zoe, and you can imagine how much actually quite kind of like perspective altering information you get talking to Zoe about this stuff. But yeah, hopefully she'll stick around, answer any further questions. If you have any announcements, pop them in the chat. So things like jobs or, you know, other things that you think might be of interest to the community, let us know. We have a couple of announcements. So the first is the next meetup. So we're going to be a day early next month because of the break, and there's a public holiday or something, I think, that on the Thursday. I've forgotten what it is now. So next time we're going to have Mary Sabakotsky come from Canva. She's going to be talking about powering up content strategy with experience maps. Lorian and I, Anzac Day, that's what it is. Thank you. Lorian and I were really lucky enough to see this talk at Web Directions last year, and we often talk to people about experience maps and how incredibly valuable we think that they are and how fascinating the work is that Mary does on them. So come next week and you'll find out about more. And Mary's also just said in the chat there that they're looking for midweight content strategists at Canva. So there are some absolutely fabulous people working at Canva in content. They're doing a lot of really, really interesting stuff. So yeah, reach out if you are interested. Our other very exciting announcement is that we're now putting our talks on YouTube. So you can, we have been making these available, but they are now going to be available on YouTube so that you can access them afterwards. So Mags Hanley's talk from last meetup is there. And Angus has just popped something in the chat. Erith has also just said, Erith, do you want to jump on and tell us a little bit about Oswy?
Sure,
I'm assuming
sorry.
that's how you say it.
I'm just having my lunch. Sorry, guys. Yeah, thanks, Zoe. Lovely insights there, especially around the inventions. I didn't know most of those. So there is an organisation, AusEway, which is the Australian Web Accessibility Initiative, and they have lots of resources and information on their website, and like a panel of consultants who, you know, advertise their services on there. And yeah, they're really growing a partnership across Australia. So I recommend people, and full disclosure, I run some inclusive research operations training under the AusEway banner, but just letting you know about AusEway, check it out.
Thank you. That's awesome. Okay, last one is our training, which you would probably all know about if you've come to the meetup before. We've got another foundation in content design training coming up in June, which is the one that we run on behalf of Content Design London here in Australia. And we have advanced content design running on the 1st and 2nd of August. So both of those are really great. There's some chatter about Angus doing some TikTok dancing on behalf of our new YouTube channel. So maybe you can look forward to that. And Zoe has also popped in a course on designing placemats.
Just going to mention this very quickly for anyone who's a public servant here. Just recently, I've had a higher than expected level of interest in this. So it might be of interest to more people here. I have a 1-day course on designing placemats. For those of you who aren't familiar, that is a printable PowerPoint slide with lots of information on it. So that was commissioned by an APS department 2 years ago. I think about 150 people have taken it now. Surprise, I didn't know that placemat training was a big deal in government, but from the inquiries I've been getting recently, it seems that it's something that a lot of people are really trying to get into policy people's ambit at the moment. So if you are one of the people who is surprisingly keen on placemats, come and talk to me, because I've already got something for that, which has been tried and tested extensively and was specifically made for placemats.
Cool. Thank you. Awesome. All right. Thank you so much, guys. That's our meetup for this month. We'll be back next month. And yeah, we'll stick around to have a bit of a chat, and any questions that people have for Zoe, or just generally, we'll be here for a few more minutes. They're trendy, meant to save people having to read reports. Yeah.
They are.
That's
so
right.
Bye, Heron. Yeah.
Thanks, Heron.
Yeah, they're you know what? It seems that senior SES types really like them. Lovely cats. SES types really like them, but the people who have suddenly been tasked with doing content design and visual design for the first time bizarrely find that very challenging. So who saw that coming? Oh, we've got some questions here. Okay. Real number of people with disabilities. Yeah, ADHD. Okay, so Corinna says, I was thinking about the real number of people with disabilities and how I'm hearing people who have ADHD and or autism say they are different, not defective. So they don't identify with having a disability, but they still need support. Beautiful question. Or a beautiful insight. That's very much true. So I don't think this square has been, I don't think this circle has been squared yet. I don't think that the disability model of medical or social really gels particularly well with neurodiversity. There is another model called the biopsychosocial model, which is potentially a bit closer to being a match, but it hasn't really settled out yet. So in autism circles, so I'm what's called ADHD, which that sounds ridiculous, but it's autistic ADHD. It's worth pointing out that this is quite new stuff. It wasn't until 1994 that medicine admitted that maybe some ADHD people continued having ADHD in adulthood sometimes. We know now that it's genetic, therefore it's permanent. It wasn't until 2013 that the same cohort admitted that maybe autism and ADHD could happen at the same time, sometimes-ish. We now know that it's more likely than not that they're actually kind of like the same thing with different presentations in different people. So our diagnostic models are deficit-based, right? They're about what's wrong with you. They're looking for bad things. That doesn't match very well with people's lived experiences. And it's actually one way of explaining why we've got like the diagnostic flood that we're looking at right now, because a lot of us aren't actually well represented in the deficit model because we're doing really well and we're living great lives. So you're completely spot on. Is that a solved problem? No, it's not a solved problem. And we've got, I want to see here, in projects I've worked on, people see accessibility as an afterthought. Oh, and something that isn't required to think about for a moment. Yep. Okay. How can we communicate the importance of accessibility to designers? First off, okay, we got the carrot and the stick. One, you don't want to get sued. Okay. So we want to think like a bad guy here. Yeah, think like a bad guy. Do we want to be losing all our money on unnecessary litigation? No. So we are going to conform with our minimum standards, which are currently WCAG 2.2. Because if we don't, we'll get sued. And if we're in the public service, we are legally obliged to release only compliance services. So that's the stick. Worth pointing out that WCAG doesn't say anything about cognitive diversity. So that 1 in 5 of dyslexics not covered in WCAG, really, not at all. And I think that ADHD is going to end up being about a 1 in 5 as well. I have a reason for that. Feel free to ask, but they're not covered. They're not covered by the legal compliance. So that's your stick. Your carrot is, it's cheap and effective. That's the other one. Yep, it's an easy way to get good benefits. Okay, so would people like to turn their mics on?
Yeah, it's hard to have a chat, isn't it, when everyone's on
Yeah.
mute?
So Miguel, your question is what the reason for the 1 in 5?
Yeah, I'm really interested to know.
That is the population rate for hypermobility.
Oh, yes, we talked about
yes.
this. My
So
husband suspects he's on that. Yeah, and he's super hypermobile.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that'll do it. So there's a very high level of correlation between hypermobility, which is genetic, and ADHD, which is also genetic.
That's so interesting.
Huh?
That's just so interesting.
Yeah, it's really
correlation.
weird. So hypermobility doesn't always present the way you think it does. It can actually present as having really tight muscles. Because if your collagen isn't holding your joints together, your muscles will do it for you. So there's about 1 in 5 prevalence of hypermobility, and I suspect it's going to be the same for ADHD. Yes, hello, fellow out ADHDers. Hi, Corinna. Nice to meet you. Always good to have more. Hello. Terrific. Yeah. Yeah. So how do we communicate? I want to go back to, I can only see VMADHU. So I don't know what your actual name is. Communicating the importance of accessibility as designers. Look, I'll tell you something. The whole premise of this talk is that telling stakeholders they should do it because you want to make a world a better place absolutely does not work. Okay. So if there's one thing that I would tell you not to do is do it because it's benevolent and it's the right thing to do. Because your stakeholders will go, oh yeah, well, benevolence is an optional extra. Boom, off the table, it's gone. Yeah. So we need to be a little bit more mean in our thinking about this.
Yeah, that makes sense. I like the way you approached it.
Okay. Who wants to put their camera on so I can see them? I can see a lot of black screens.
Thank you,
Hey,
Koa.
it's Christy. Hi, Christy. How are you? Okay. Oh, Christy, can you tell us something about what you learned about accessibility and inclusion in the tourism industry? Because that's massive at the moment in the, okay. Christy, tell us, what was the most interesting thing you learned?
Well, I wasn't aware that the tourism industry in Australia was focusing so much on accessibility and inclusion. I think, is it the Olympics happening in Gold Coast?
Yeah.
I think like something happening because with all the research we just got, everything got lost. But there's some government grants at the moment going out for anyone in the tourism industry if they are able to apply for it. And they're reaching out for consultancy agencies, which is what we were working with to get that. So getting an audit report and even getting help to write applications for grants. And then through that, I got to visit a few of Melbourne big site visits for my research, and it was amazing to see what everyone is doing, especially the museums. Non-profit organizations are doing a lot. So if anyone has a job lined up for me, I'll be great.
Look, honestly, this is the the purpose of having that kind of the invention stuff in there is just to point out that abled people really like disabled people stuff. They really do. Given the choice, abled people will almost universally choose to use accessible products and services, with the exception of one criteria. Any guesses? If you tell them it's supposed to be for disabled people, then they're not as keen on it.
Wow.
So my personal theory is that the reason why disability doesn't get more credit for being the driver of innovation that it so profoundly is that the abled world has the assumption that disabled equals worse, therefore made for disabled equals worse. And the ongoing and historically extremely consistent fact that disabled people stuff is better has never really kind of broken through into public consciousness, which sucks. And I'm trying really hard to start correcting that, because disabled history is super cool, and I think it's great.
The one thing that you mentioned earlier about how servicing the disability community would be helpful for everyone as well is that they were saying and how they actually are better, they are more loyal customers. That was something that we found in our research as well, because in the tourism industry, if you are able to cater for one person, it's not only the person itself, it's a carer, it's a family. They're going to be using the service again. If they're going to stay at your place, they're going to stay more, usually longer as well, because there's limited, it might be a niche service. So that's where that student project was amazing too.
Yeah. So if you find something that works, you're going to keep using it. Who wants to guess how many carers there are in Australia?
No
This
idea.
is going to kill you guys. 2.2 million.
Whoa.
Oh, yeah. Right? Yes, Brian, it is a lot of people. It's a huge amount. So I didn't really have the time to talk about carers as a separate group, but it's huge. It's a big chunk of change. So, and carers are often in a decision-making capacity in relation to products and services, especially where the disabled person is not in a position to make the decisions themselves. So the amount of buying power in that population is unbelievable.
That's really interesting. I think we'll probably just have, is there any last questions? Maybe one more, time for one more? Okay, good. Zoe, thank you so much. Seriously, I know I've said it a few times, but I think I really love how kind of grounded the information in reality is. Do you know what I mean? Like I really like not the fact that we're not talking that idea of the kind of benevolent and like, let's do it because it's right. It's just like, this is just the reality. Here is actually how it's driving markets, even from the way that you're talking about. I think that's such a great lens for us all to like take back to the organizations we're in that are often like that minimum viable product conversation. What's the word? It's responsible for a lot of like not delivering good experiences, really. It becomes an excuse for that. So this is really great. There's lots of ammunition here to bring back. So
I'm so glad that was the goal.
Yeah, great. All right, guys, we'll hopefully see you next month. And thanks again to Zoe for your time today. All right.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks so much, everybody.
See you later, everyone.
See ya. See you next time. There we go. We'll just close it all out. All right. I'll close the meeting off. Thanks, guys.
Okay.
Bye.
See you later.
See ya. Thanks, Zoe.
I'll wait until it's done.
Yeah. I don't know if I can actually do this. I think I can. There we go. And then put in there we go. Put them in.
Wait, okay. Oh,
that was awesome.
Oh, thanks, McGee.
Love it.
Okay. You have a lovely Easter.
You too, and we'll see you. I'm sure we'll keep seeing you around because
Absolutely.
yeah,
Okay.
we'll
Bye
always
for now.
forward people onto your training and stuff. So
See
okay,
you later.
okay, bye.
Bye.